Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Lionel Bacon, welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe. You are the center of the universe for the next hour or so. Appreciate you driving like an hour and a half from southwest of Chesterfield tonight. Really do, but you're in what some of us call Paul's basement studio, so I appreciate you coming out and really looking forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Are you going to start a podcast, you think?
I don't know if I've thought that far through it, but it was thrown out there last week, and I actually kind of sat down and started thinking that it would be fun. It'd be a lot of fun, I think, to do it.
It's a ton of fun, man.
Yeah, choosing a lane and topics and various guests. And
yes, do it.
Probably be a lot of fun.
Kevin would be on your podcast.
And yeah, I'm sure that'd be interesting. You love talking to people,
right?
So I mean, come on, and you've got a great personality. You would be a hit on a podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it some thought.
We can hook you up with all the stuff you need to do it.
Okay.
You got space in your house to do it?
Yeah.
All right. It's just a matter of buying the equipment and getting it going.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll talk more about it.
Okay, cool. All right, so you did not grow up here in Richmond. Where did you grow up, Lionel?
Grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, on 13th and Muhammad Ali Boulevard.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When was Muhammad Ali Boulevard named? Do you remember?
Well, it was named Walnut Street until the name was switched over. But my one of my older brothers was friends with Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali's dad dated a lady that lived in the building next to us. And every year, his dad would have the newest white Cadillac. So those are my memories of seeing Muhammad Ali as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Oh yeah, he's a legend.
And he was around a lot back in the day.
Yeah, he was around quite a bit. One of my older brothers was a pretty prominent athlete in his own right. He took the University of Louisville to their first Final Four in '72, and then got drafted by Golden State, 5th round. So he was a pretty big name in the city himself, and so he and Ali were friends. And
Nice.
Oh, wow.
used to see him. Yeah.
Ali was a little bit older than him.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I'm the youngest of 12, and my mom had me when she was 50.
What?
So you have to. So if my brothers are old enough to be my uncles, and I have a brother that could be my grandfather.
Can you name all your siblings?
Absolutely, in order.
All right, let's do it.
All right, it goes boy, girl from top to bottom.
Wow.
Starts with a boy, ends with a boy. Sid is the oldest.
Okay.
Now all of my siblings aren't still with us
Right.
because of that age gap, but Sid is the oldest, and then there's a girl, Azalee. Then there was a boy, Thatchett, and then there's a girl, Clara. Then there's a boy, Lewis, and then there's a girl, Rose. Then there's a boy, Clint, and then there's a girl, Anne, then there's a boy, Bill, and then there's a girl, Heidi, and then me at the 12th spot.
Rob, did you get all that down?
I did.
All right. That's pretty good. I only have one sibling. I forget her name after that.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot going on. So did you feel like you were being raised by a lot of people?
No, again, because the age range was so wide, I tell people I grew up youngest of 12, but at any given time in our apartment, there were, it was my mom, my sister, myself, and maybe one or two, because they were, like just out of high school and not really college, but working and had their own places and stuff. So it wasn't a packed house youngest of 12, but, still 11 siblings.
You still keep in contact with
Yeah.
all of them?
All those that are still around, I try to make visits to Louisville every now and then. It's harder now, but I do it by taking. I'll take a trip by myself, like a weekend trip, versus loading the whole family up and making that 9-hour drive. I'll pop in and out, and then unfortunately funerals.
Yeah.
How do you go there? How do you travel?
Drive 64. So I jump on 64 here in Richmond and never switch lanes. I get off at my housing project.
And so you're going
Through Charleston, West Virginia,
Yeah, you
Huntington,
are. Yeah,
Ashland,
yeah.
Kentucky, Lexington, and then Louisville.
Is the grass actually blue in that part of Kentucky?
It's not blue, but it's got kind of a bluish tint to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do you go back?
I try to get back a couple times a year, but with funerals, it ends up 3-4 times a year.
Yeah. So you said you grew up in a project.
Yeah, I grew up in the housing projects. It was it's called Beecher Terrace, and they did a show on it called Prison Nation. And 85% of the residents that I grew up with in my neighborhood had a prison record, had or have. They tore it down now, so that they just recently, within the last year, my building went down. So the housing projects I lived in went from 9th to 13th, and they started at 9th with the tear down and then ended on 13th. So my building was literally the last one. And my neighborhood sat 10 blocks from downtown Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, prominent 4th Street Avenue, and where the University of Louisville plays, the Muhammad Ali Center, the Louisville Slugger Museum. So you have prominent downtown, but you've got this kind of eyesore housing projects that is literally right when you get off the exit.
Wow.
So I would get off the exit into my projects. And I think it was just a combination of the violence, it being old and decrepit and aging, and then the city just wanting to do something else and move those people out. So
how do you, because I know looking back on a childhood is different than when you were in it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look back on your childhood? Do you look back on it, hey, I was a happy kid, things were this way, that way, great, if not? How do you look back on it?
Yeah, I look back on it, man, and I tell you, I wouldn't. There's nothing I would change. And my mom, was incredible. And there were a lot of guys. You figure, if it's 9th to 13th, that's a 4-block radius, but it's also 3 blocks wide, so it's a mile around my housing projects. And there's probably 70 buildings with 16 apartments in each building. So you on any given month, you could have 200 kids and 150 boys between the ages of 10 and 16. So there, you can always walk outside and get a football game or a basketball game, but I would not change a thing. I would not change a thing. My mom was just so amazing. There were a lot of guys in my neighborhood that were better than I was at basketball or as good and Division I talent, but the 3 things I had. Number one, I had an amazing mom who she had rules, and that's how she got 12 kids through an environment that has an 85% prison rate with not one going to prison.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
So, and without a husband.
Yeah.
My dad was killed before I was 4. He was murdered. So I'm 52 with 3 sons under 9, and I've never even seen a picture of my dad.
Wow.
Never even seen a picture. But the first thing I had was an incredible mom. The second thing I had was, God just kind of guided my steps. Every time I was at a fork in the road in my life, I just kind of fell into the right way, and it was just kind of God guiding me. And then the third thing I had was the ability to play basketball. That was my tool to pay for undergraduate school, graduate school. It opened all these doors up. There were other guys in my neighborhood that were talented, but they just didn't have those 3 things, and so they struggled.
They didn't have maybe a parent as your mom, and maybe made some bad decisions at some of those forks.
Yeah. I tell people in my neighborhood, my problem wasn't that I didn't have role models. It was that my role models didn't have role models.
Yeah.
So they couldn't be a role model to me.
Yeah. So in growing up, were academics an important part of your childhood?
No, only because in that environment it was you just kind of needed to go to school. You had to go to school. Nobody, we weren't pumped about going to school. But then as you get older and sports gets bigger, you understand that the two have to coexist, and you can't have one without the other. So you by default have to focus on the other. But I did well in school. I loved math. Up until they started mixing shapes and letters in and X squared. And
Man, I say that all the time. I was so good at math until they put X's and Y's. I'm like, what is this?
Wait a minute, you were good through 7th grade? Is that what y'all were saying?
Pretty much. That's what I'm saying.
When it went, when it took that turn, then I just fell in love with English and history. But my blessing, another blessing I had was, even though I lived in that environment, I didn't go to school in that environment. And it was alphabetical by last name and the street you lived on. that sent me to Ballard High School and St. Matthew's Elementary School and Westport Elementary School. I never went to school in my neighborhood. So by the time I got to high school, I was around all these kids, predominantly white, who were talking about college and SAT and all that stuff. So that, and then I knew I needed that to play college ball. So it worked out great.
If you had happened to be in a different building in your project.
Yeah, if I would have gone to Central High School, so there's two housing projects that sit right next to each other. There's Beecher Terrace, which was mine that was torn down, and then there's Muhammad Ali Boulevard, and then right across the street there's Village West projects. And most of those kids went to Central High School, but some of the kids in Beecher Terrace went to Central too. And by luck, I did not go to Central. I went to Ballard, and it was everything.
Wow, and that's why you love your last name.
That's why I love my last name.
If your last name was Zachariah or something, who knows?
It would have been just totally different.
It is a cool last name, though.
Yeah. Everybody loves bacon.
Who doesn't love bacon?
I mean,
Vegans and vegetarians, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
They love it. They just don't eat it.
They still love it. That's right.
That's a great point.
Right.
All right. So Ballard High School, were you a big man at school?
Yeah, and that's tough because, Ballard's is a factory. Ballard's a basketball factory. So it was unheard of for freshmen to make varsity. But my freshman year, myself and another guy played varsity. And I think we were 33-2 my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, we were 32-4. I mean, just...
Did you start your freshman year?
My freshman year, I did not. My sophomore year, I got playing time. But then my junior and senior year was kind of my show.
Was Allen Houston on one of these teams?
Allen Houston was there my senior year. So as a senior, it goes from unheard of to make varsity as a freshman to fast forward. I'm a senior starting with a freshman. But that freshman we knew was going to be really good.
Because he definitely was really, really good.
He was really good. So he was about 6'2" as a freshman and weighed literally about 120, 130. Wow. Just super thin. But he had an NBA jump shot as a ninth grader.
Yeah, every time I watched him play for the Knicks, if he was going up, I knew it had like a 70% chance of going in.
Yeah, his probably until this day, and I've seen a lot of guys play. Top 3 prettiest jump shots I've seen, period.
Who are the other two, other than me?
I would say you would be a close second probably in them. I'd probably rate Rex Chapman as...
Really?
Yeah. I'd probably rate Rex pretty high.
Did you ever play against Rex?
Rex and I are friends now. In high school, we were kind of pitted against each other. I was Louisville, Kentucky. He was Apollo, which was out in Lexington. And so we were two of the better players. He was Mr. Basketball and should have been. But we played against each other my senior year, and Allen Houston missed that game because he was sick, and he was a starter. So we're missing our starting 2 guard. We lost by 2. I had 31 and Rex had 45.
Wait a minute, you got 31 from the point?
Yeah, and we played in front of about 16,000.
Wow. Kentucky's crazy for basketball.
And then when Rex and I partnered up, so every year the best players from Kentucky, the best seniors from Kentucky play the best seniors from Indiana. And so 1986, which was the year I played, was the last year that Kentucky swept Indiana. But we had a loaded squad. We had a 7'2" guy, Felton Spencer, that played at the University of Louisville.
Yep.
We had a 6'8" Reggie Hansen that played at Kentucky with Rex. I mean, we could have knocked off some college teams with that high school team.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Anybody on the Indiana side that we would know?
Yeah, they had a point guard who was supposed to be a bunch, and his name was Tion McCoy, and he went to Maryland. And this would have been back in the 80s, but he didn't. He had a good career there, but yeah, we put it to Indiana pretty. I mean, it wasn't close. And then every year since then, I mean, think about that. That's 35, 36 years ago, and since then, it's either been 1-1 or Indiana has won. We were the last team to sweep Indiana.
That's crazy.
And you think about all the kids who have come out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Right. Yeah.
So.
What made Ballard a factory?
Well, it was out so it would be equivalent to, take James River High School. Take James River High School.
Yeah.
But you've got Gilpin Court funneling athletes to James River High School.
Yeah.
So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got fundamental kids, but you've got kids that are tough too.
Right.
And so
That's a good mix.
we just always won. We've never had a rebuilding year. We don't do that.
You go back and see games from time to time?
I haven't been back to a Ballard game in a long time. The last time I played on that floor was with Allen Houston. We had a reunion game, but this was a long time ago, and we lit it up. I mean, it was 135 and it was the best players from the 90s against the best players from the 80s. And so we had a lot of fun.
How many points did you average your senior year?
High school or college?
High school.
21, 22, something like that.
As a point guard. Mm-hmm. Were you known as a scorer? I mean, you had to be scoring 20 points.
Yeah, we played an offense where it was just two guards. So I ran the show as a point, but in the offense there wasn't a point guard goes here to it was a two guard front.
Got it.
But I quarterbacked on defense and all that. But yeah.
Were you known as a defender?
Not in high school.
Is that by choice?
Defense has changed in basketball. Defense has changed. The emphasis on it has changed a lot. Like you have guys now who make it to the NBA simply based on defense, whereas the thought wasn't really there to do that in the past, and there wasn't as much pride taken on defense. Everything was about offense. But now, you have kids who are getting scholarships to play defense. So there's a different focus on it now. And it wasn't that I didn't have the ability; it just
Wasn't a focus.
wasn't my focus. I joke around and say, people say, man, did you have a ton of assists in college? And I said, man, my scholarship didn't say anything about passing the ball. And I read it twice.
That's great.
I wasn't asked to do it. I didn't come here to do that. But it's kind of a joke. But
Sure.
Yeah.
So growing up, if you had not grown up in the projects, let's say you grew up in the suburbs, do you think you would have ended up playing basketball in college?
That's the first time I've ever had that question. I would have played some sport because in my family, you were going to play a sport. I mean, it's what we all did.
Yeah.
So I was going to play something. And I look back on it and I wish I would have played football.
You never played?
So again, growing up in Beecher Terrace and going to Ballard, the kids from Beecher Terrace, if you chose football, you were encouraged to stay with football. Even though the basketball coach was saying, man, hey, come on out here. And then if you chose basketball, the football coach was saying, hey, man, come on out. But my 4 years, we had one guy that did it. But I wish I would have chosen it, but I didn't because I was 150 at the time.
Right.
So I chose what was easiest and,
150 going up a guy as fast, weighing 220, it's not a fun experience.
Yeah. But then when I got to college and fell in love with weights, it was like, man,
Would you have been a quarterback, running back, or
corner.
Corner. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
corner.
Okay. Well, you got the height for that. I mean, 6 foot's a good corner.
Yeah, corner. I love the corner spot, man.
Like Dion lockdown kind of thing.
Mano y mano.
Yeah. On an island. Let's get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Football's a fun sport.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how did you choose VCU? How many schools were looking at you?
Okay. When it came down to it, I narrowed it down to I didn't want a ton of schools out there, and so I narrowed it down to 4, and 2 of them were one was a courtesy visit. I didn't want to go to Tennessee State, which actually is where Eddie George just took the job.
He did. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's cool.
I didn't want to go there, but the coach at the time played ball with my brother in college, and so I took that visit. VCU came in the picture at the end, kind of the second half of my senior year. And then I was really interested in Missouri, who was recruiting me hard at the time. And then I liked Clemson. So those were the 4. But I took the Tennessee State visit. And then when I took the VCU visit, I canceled my other visits.
Really?
Yeah, I knew I wasn't going to waste their time. I knew I was coming here.
Why?
Phil Stinney.
Oh, okay.
Phil Stinney took me out on my visit. I wanted to play with him, wanted to be around him. I liked the school. I liked the city. I knew that I could not thrive and do well in a school that was out in the woods.
Like Blacksburg or Charlottesville.
Yeah, so all those schools were off the list. I needed to be in a city school, and VCU was that. And then the coach at the time, Mike Polio, coached one of my brothers in high school. So there was that kind of familiarity as well. So it was, I took my visit, and I knew I wanted to play here.
Who was at Missouri back then?
Norm Stewart.
Yeah. And then what was his best player back in the late 80s?
His nickname was Band-Aid.
Derek Cheevius.
Derek Cheevius.
Yeah.
Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Who wore the
They were
Band-Aid.
good back then. Missouri was really good.
They were very good.
They were top 5 a couple different times.
Yep. Derek Cheevius.
It's a great name.
So did you verbally commit and then sign? Is that how it worked back
To
then?
VCU?
Yeah.
Yeah. Verbally committed and then signed.
Yeah.
And then, so, in that environment I grew up in, when it's signing day, the media comes, Mike Polio comes, Tubby Smith, who was at VCU at the time before going to
he was assistant coach for a long time. For
Tulsa
VCU.
and Georgia and Kentucky and all that. So Tubby Smith, head coach Mike Polio, and the sports information director, a guy named Mike Baldwick. Well, when they pull up in my neighborhood, there's kind of some media presence, but there's also a group of guys that probably didn't look welcoming, and not everybody wanted to get out of the car. It was which was not everybody's comfortable in every environment. But Tubby Smith still talks about my mom's sweet potato pies.
Nice.
But it's just kind of, you've got college coaches and college guys who are uncomfortable in an environment like that. I've got to come out and say, man, come on in. These are my buddies.
This is where I live.
These are my buddies.
They're coming from Richmond too. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tubby was basically the primary recruiter
Yeah.
for VCU for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should check out Rolando's episode. He talks about Tubby. I won't spoil it, but he tells a story about Tubby the night before Rolando had to commit.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty good story.
Yeah, Tubby's a good guy, man.
You keep in touch with him?
I talked to Tubby to congratulate him. I don't even remember what job it was. But when I called him, the first thing he said was, "Man, how's your mom doing?" That sweet potato pie, man. Well, her sweet potato pie was something.
That is great.
So, your freshman year, did you get playing time? You got some playing time your freshman year, right?
My freshman year was a waste. It was a waste. I sat down behind a senior and a sophomore, and I played like 18 minutes my whole freshman year.
Ooh.
I mean, it was something crazy.
That's not even a half of one game.
I really should have redshirted. But the crazy part is, so I sat down pretty much that whole freshman year. I got thrown into a game at Marquette. Our starting point guard got in foul trouble. Who was a senior who was just better than me. He was just better. The sophomore who was in front of me was just a much better defensive player, and he was more confident. So the starter gets in foul trouble. Second guy, he needs a break, and I get put in at Marquette in a tight game. And when I tell you I got my pocket picked twice, man, it was one of those where the game is faster for a kid coming from high school. It's faster at the point guard than it is a 6'10" kid.
Right.
His game is still the same pace, but for a point guard, when you come to college, everybody's as fast.
It's
as
another
you.
level.
It's another level, and it was all the other games. I was prepared for that, but this guy got me twice, and that could have really wrecked it for me.
Yeah.
But I kept myself together, and my teammates. Phil was in my corner, and then I came back. So that year was the only year that I did not stay and go to summer school, because I wanted to graduate in 4 years instead of the 5 they were giving me. I wanted to do it in 4. So after my freshman year, it's the only summer I went home. That summer, I worked a job, night shift, from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, cleaning up hotels. So I was vacuuming floors and mopping and dishes and all that. I'd get off work at 7 a.m. and I'd get my ball and I'd go in our park and I'd train. And then I'd be there until about 10 or 11. And then I'd go home, eat, take a break, and then go to sleep earlier that night. But I did it all summer, and I started lifting weights because I was not going to come back and sit. I had a sophomore in front of me. I wasn't going to be a junior still sitting behind the same senior. So when I came back as a sophomore, I started. And the guy who was then a junior, he sat.
Did you think about quitting?
I thought about transferring. And the reason I thought about transferring was not because of playing time. That had nothing to do with it. It was because the coach was so hard on me. And then Phil Stinney pulled me aside one day after practice, and I was telling him, like, man, I think I just need to leave. And Phil was like, listen, your problem isn't that coach is getting on you. Your problem would be if he wasn't. He's on you because he knows what's in you. And, I pushed through it, and so I ended up scoring like 960 points in my career, but that was over 3 years.
Right.
My freshman year was a waste. So I learned, and I also went to college. I should have, now that everybody reclasses,
right,
that would have been the option for me, or either the red shirt, because physically I would have been a different kid. Plus I was younger. So my son who is 9, I'm going to make sure he's on the path to where he goes to college at the right time. He's got an August birthday. But just being careful of that. I mean, I had a wasted freshman year.
Yeah.
I didn't, the practices were great and I learned, but in terms of playing time, I sat.
Yeah, something happens between 18 and 20 physiologically, and if you're not prepared for it,
But it made you go home and do what you did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if you gotten more playing time, maybe you got a little more comfortable.
Yep.
It drove you to do what you did,
Yep.
and obviously that worked out well.
Yeah, I knew I needed to be stronger. My game I wasn't worried about, but I knew it was my confidence and just being physically stronger. And I went home, and and then over the course of my 4 years, I physically changed. I hated weights at first, and all kids, man, it throws my shot off. Well, it does, because you shot right after you lifted. But if you consistently lift, your body gets used to it, And so
it is a weirder feeling lifting and then shooting right away than it is if you haven't lifted in several hours.
Very weird.
But you get used to it, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think people put enough emphasis on confidence, though, in not just basketball, sports itself, but I mean,
Life itself, man.
Life itself, right? You went and got that confidence and went right up. I mean, it's huge. And just in a game itself, if you're not confident in what you're doing, you're not going to succeed. So
yeah, it's a difference maker. I try to instill that in kids now, because I wish I would have. The way I think now, I wish that switch would have flipped years ago. Now I'm just in a different stratosphere mentally.
Yeah. It's cool being there, right?
It is. I just don't, and that's one of the reasons I love Spartan racing so much, is because it's, you've got the miles to do and you've got the obstacles. But then at some point, mentally, the difference is going to be made mentally. And so that's where I don't think there's anybody on my level with that.
Talk about that a little bit. Give us like the elevator speech on what is a Spartan race.
Or give us a longer than the elevator speech.
Yeah, okay.
It's
a long ride on the elevator.
So
tall building. Yeah.
So it's an obstacle course race, and there's 3 different levels. There's a sprint, super, and a beast. And so the sprint is roughly 3.5 to 5 miles with 20 obstacles. And so the obstacles are like carrying things, monkey bar type things, spear throw, rope climb.
Ropes are rough, man. I hate ropes.
That was my Achilles heel when I first got in it.
But you now know how to climb them, because there's a technique to it.
Got it. And then there's a super, which is a little bit longer race and 25 obstacles. And then there's a beast, which is 13 to 17, 18 miles with 30 obstacles. There's another one, which
Wait, hold on. Say that again. How many obstacles? 30?
On a beast.
On a beast. And then you're essentially running how far?
13 to 17 or 18.
So I'm going to tell a quick story. I ran a half marathon one time. Slow as molasses, but I finished it. I was happy. And I was thinking, do I run this again? And I'm not making this up. A minute after I finished, a guy my age now, guy our age, died at the finish line. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to run another half marathon. You're doing more than a half, and you're doing 30 obstacles.
Right, but then there's another level called the Ultra, which is 30 miles, 60 obstacles that I'm doing June 5th. So it's my next race.
Have you ever done one of those?
No, man, I've done the Beast.
Yeah.
But I've not done an Ultra, so that's what I'm preparing for now.
When is that?
June 5th in Ohio.
How do you prepare for it, though? I mean, because where are the options? You know what I mean? So how do you?
So the obstacles for me are easy. So, but the race itself caters to a runner, because, and the running, you're never on level ground. You're always either in the woods, you're uphill, downhill, in mud and dirt and river, swim. You know, you're never just running. So it caters to the runner in that, regardless of how dense the obstacles are over the course of that mileage, you still have the mileage.
Yeah.
So if you've got a guy who's super strong and great at obstacles, and then you've got a guy who is naturally a runner and 25 pounds lighter, that 30 miles is going to cater to the runner, unless it's really wet or really cold and it muddies it up for the runner. Right. That gives the stronger guy more time to grind, and it makes it a tougher race.
So you're doing a lot of training, running, and stuff like that right now to get. Tell us about the when you went. I think it was the Nationals where you
World Championship.
Yeah, tell us about that experience, because that was a little harrowing.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I got into Spartan racing. I had seen it on TV in like 2015, just flipping channels. I'd seen it and had zero interest in it. And then in 2018. Easter, we had a thing in our neighborhood, and we were at some friend's house, and they were doing a cookout, and this girl had on a Spartan race shirt, and I said, "You've done one of those?" And she lives in our neighborhood, and she said, "I have." And she said, "Man, it was the toughest thing I've ever done." And when she said that, it was like, where'd you do one? And she started telling me about it, and that day I went home and looked it up. And I've always trained and tried to stay in my top level shape, so it was a matter of changing my training program. So I looked it up, and I signed up for one in D.C., the D.C. Maryland race, and went up there, competed, did great, and then just kind of, as I'm walking to my car after my first race, this guy walks up behind me, and he says, "Man, you were awesome out there. Have you ever raced before?" And I said, "Man, it's my first one." He was like, "Man, your first one?" He said, "How'd you do?" I said, "Man, I loved it." He said, "Did you hit the spear throw?" And I said, "I did." I said, I was 23 for 23 on the obstacles. He said, "This is your first race, and you went 23 for 23 on the obstacles." And I was like, "Yeah." He said, and this was June of 2018. He said, "You think you'll ever do another one?" And I said, "I think I'd like to be in the World Championship in 20.
After your first one.
But I ended up in the World Championship in 19. So the following year. And that was a real cool experience, because so you first had to qualify to get to the North American Championship, which is in West Virginia. And so it's the best from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So you have to qualify there to go to the World Championship. Well, that was my first beast. West Virginia was.
And the mountains are no joke there.
Of all the Spartan races, West Virginia is highly touted as one of the top 3 worst to run.
Yeah.
Because of the elevation. Like, I trained in an elevation mass to simulate that prior. But I had gotten hurt like 6 weeks out. And so I missed all my running. So it was just a matter of, so I knew I was going to just try to finish it, because I hadn't done a beast yet. But also mentally thinking, mentally I'm going to push through it. And so, long story short, I go to West Virginia. It's my first beast. It was the hardest thing I've ever done by a long shot. But I qualified, which put me in the World Championship. The World Championship was, it was a really cool experience, because, there have been times in my life where I've been in situations where I sit and I'm that kid from Beecher Terrace, thinking to myself, man, I'm, a kid from Beecher Terrace, youngest of 12, is standing with the best 250 athletes in his group in the world, representing the United States.
Could have never imagined, right?
And I've had 100 of those experiences where I just said, man, God is amazing. he has put me here. So I ran that race, and so cool story about that. The World Championship, when they run it, it's a 1-day event. So it's the best from around the world. They bring them in, and it's typically run on a Saturday. And then on Sunday, they open it up to people who have come who want to run that course. They're not competing for a World Championship. They just want to do the beast on that course. And it was Olympic Valley, which is Tahoe, which is Lake Tahoe in California.
Yeah.
So this year they changed it. And instead of Saturday with the competitors and Sunday with the open group, they switched it. And on Saturday, it was 54 degrees. Saturday night, a cold front comes in, and it's 28 the next morning. And they were and snow on the mountains, and they were considering canceling it. And so they decided to move forward. And so of 250 people that took off, 120 finished.
Yeah, I bet.
And I had an injury, a pretty serious injury, but I also went into hypothermia. You're in and out of water. Gear is everything in a Spartan race. And the first 3.5 miles was uphill.
Yeah.
There were guys that didn't finish that. But I had a scene in it, and I think about this often, that was like no other scene I've ever experienced in sports. And it was the obstacle that I got hurt on. But in the World Championship, they kind of turned the volume up on all the obstacles. So if in a regular Spartan race you're carrying a log that's 50 pounds, in the World Championship there would be 2. Or if the sandbag carry is a half mile, in the World Championship it might be 2 miles. The swim might be longer. They turn them up to what's called beast mode. So the obstacle that I got hurt on, you see all these war movies, and you see movies like Gladiator and 300 and stuff like that. But there was a scene in the Spartan race, and it was the double sandbag carry. So you have 2 you can carry them in your hands. The easiest way is to put one on each shoulder, or So, but you're going downhill down this embankment, and on the side, it's wide enough for probably a car to drive down, but it would drive down, and then it could loop around and drive back up. So from where I'm carrying these sandbags, I can kind of look over to my sides, and I see where I've got to take it, and then back up over here. So I can also look down here, but look right there. They're going up to the finish line, right? So it was super cold, and that was probably of a 17-mile race. That was probably 8 miles into it. And so the scene, I'm going to set the scene up for you. So the scene is, you have these guys carrying these, and some girls, ladies too, carrying these sandbags, and it's snowing lightly. It's overcast, so there's the flurries coming down. And I felt like I was in a scene from the movie Gladiator, because it was like nothing was audible. I could only see people's faces. Nobody's talking, but I knew that everybody there was going through the toughest experience they've ever been through in their lives, because the look was on all of our faces. Guys would put their bags down and just kind of lean down or sit down. And so I went all the way down, and coming back up was where I popped my calf. Cool. And so it was downhill from there. But that scene, I'll never, I felt like I was among dead men, if that makes sense, because there was no life on anybody's face, because we just needed to get those bags back up that hill just to even continue the race.
Yeah.
And no sound. And the flurries.
Yeah.
I've got it in my head.
It was. I'll never forget that. And I've seen guys who I've seen in other races who are just elite athletes, and I remember seeing a few of those guys there. That, we were in deep, man. It was, and it was after the water, after one of the obstacles called the ape hanger, where you had a 99% chance of getting wet. And then the swim, it's 28 degrees and there's a swim. It was different, man.
Well, didn't you say the doctor told you probably should
Yeah. So from where my
So you
injury,
kept going.
Well, I wanted to. From where my injury happened was at the start of the decline of the first mountain. So I could see the second mountain. But I would need to get there and get down the other side. And they have volunteers and medics and all that up, everywhere on the course. And there was a girl from Russia who was kneeling beside me and kind of had her hands like this, and she's shivering. And so when the doctor comes over and, he sees that I'm hurt and I can't walk. And so I'm looking like, I'm thinking to myself, I can make it over there if I limp. But every time I try to walk off, that pain hits that says, man, shut it down. And so as I'm standing there, the guy comes over and he says, man, listen, your calf, I can tell you're hurt, but that's not your major problem. He said, you don't know it, but you're already in stage 1 of hypothermia. Then he goes, she's in stage 2. Where you don't know where you are, he said she's in stage 2, and you're going to be in that before you get there. He
At
said,
stage 4, you died, right? Yeah.
He said, yeah, you're not going to make it, man. And so it's just, and that haunts me so bad that I don't have that world championship medal. This year's world championship is in Dubai.
You going?
I will probably not make that trip. I'm not going to go that far. It's too much time away from my family. It's not, but I will get that world championship medal. I will get that. I'm gonna be in elite shape and ready, and I'm gonna qualify every year until they bring it close enough.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get it.
It's all ages too, right? There's no age brackets.
Well, there's two different ways you can run it. Well, it's 3 different ways you can run it. And follow me on this. You can go as John Doe and just sign up. And
Nobody cares how old you are. Nothing.
Nobody cares. And it's you still run the same course, and it's still as tough as it is for anybody else. But you're just saying, hey, I just want to go do it. That's open, right?
Okay.
Then there is by age group. You can compete by age group, which is going to be a lot smaller group and a lot faster group than the open. But then there's elite, which you have to qualify for. It used to be that you could just sign up for a race and then check elite, and then you're racing with the fastest guys in the world. Well, you have to qualify for that, which makes more sense, because what you don't want is John Doe holding up Robert Killian, who's a 2-time world champion, because he's struggling on the monkey bars and he needs to go next.
Right.
So you alleviate all that. So I race age group, but I've also qualified for elite. So this year I'll do 11 races, and some of those will be elite, which means, there's guys 25, 30 years old who are going to be in the block with me.
How old are you now?
I'll be 53 next month.
You're older than I am.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll be 53 next month.
Wow. Yeah. And you're doing all that craziness at 52.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you just it sparked from seeing somebody with a T-shirt on.
Yeah, I was flipping channels and saw it on TV. I saw her with a T-shirt, and I asked her, and she said, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I said, man, I want to hear more about that.
You're going to keep doing it, you think?
Yeah, I don't see me stopping, because it allows me, it's hard to explain kind of the feeling I get from Spartan racing. And it just hit me this past weekend, because I haven't raced, nobody's raced in 17 months.
Right.
Because the 2020 season was canceled, and it was canceled. The 2020 season was canceled, and there had only been like 2 races, like Jacksonville and one other. So that entire season was canceled. But I don't see me ever not loving everything that it allows me. And one of the things that I realized this weekend was there's an anxiety and a fear that I have when I'm about to start, because I could fail. I could, there are a lot of things that could happen. There are a lot of guys in this block that are, or faster or stronger. But who's not going to quit? I threw up this weekend twice, but you keep moving forward, because you want that time to be, you want to do better times. You want to compete.
How many hours a day do you work out?
In a good day. So I every morning I'm up at 3:45 every morning, regardless of what time I go to bed. Every morning up at 3:45. I'm at the front door of the gym waiting for them to open at 4:58. They open. I'm in on the bike, and I train in a long session, I might train from 5 to 6:20. That's it. But that's usually weights. And then during the day and on the weekend, I do my running or my trail and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're doing obstacle work too?
Yeah, so the obstacle work, it just kind of comes easy to me. So there, in a sprint, there's 20 obstacles now. It used to be 23. Most of my races, I go 23 for 23. But the rope early in my Spartan thing was just kind of an Achilles heel, because in my first race, I didn't learn the S hook or the J hook with your feet.
It's hard, but until you learn one of those two hooks, right?
It is. So I used to just go grab the rope and just pull up, hit the bell, and slide back down. But then as the races got longer, it was harder for me to do that after running 8 miles, to pull up 195 pounds, 25 feet, hit that bell, and come back down. Or if the rope was wet, there was no chance.
Yeah.
So the penalty for every obstacle you miss in my age group and in the age groups and the elite is 30 burpees. So when you miss an obstacle, you take your headband off and you put it in front of the camera, put it back on, and you go in the burpee pit and you do 30. Well, most people cannot walk over and just do 30 burpees. Even the best guys might go over and do 15, take a few minutes, and then do 15. I'll go over and do 10, take a second, 10, take a second, 10, and take a second. So here's where it helps me out. If I go flawless on the obstacles, let's say a guy this past weekend missed 2. Well, he had to do burpees, and there was a guy who he and I competed almost the entire race, and 2 obstacles from the end, he missed the spear throw. Mm. So he's 4 or 5 minutes behind me, yet he was with me the whole race.
Yeah. Wow.
So because he's got 30 burpees. So if you miss 5 obstacles in a beast, that's a long day.
That's a lot of burpees.
That's 150 burpees.
That's a lot of burpees.
That's a lot. So where I excel is on all of the obstacle stuff. So I keep my weight training up, and there's an Atlas stone that weighs about, let's say it's 120 pounds, and it's like a basketball, but it's
perfectly
concrete.
round, right?
Perfectly round. It's about this big. Weighs 120 pounds. Well, the same guy who was competing with me, he was a better runner. So he got there first. You have to pick it up, take it down around a flag, bring it back, drop it, and then take off. Well, he was halfway down when I came around the corner to pick mine up. Stone weighs 120. He's 155. I'm 195. I pick it up, go down, drop it off before he ever even heads back. But he's a better runner.
Yeah.
So when I get back out there on the trail, 10 minutes later, I hear him again, and he catches up, and we're stride for stride. He might take off a little bit, but he's going to miss obstacles, and I'm not.
Spear throws. How far are you throwing the spear?
Man, crazy scene this past weekend. So the spear throw is usually about 15, 20 yards, and it's got a stick in the target. And so if that spear is wet, or if you don't get the right feel for it, or if you throw it, it sticks and the shaft of it hits the ground.
And you get one shot.
You get one shot. Or here's the other thing. When you come up to the spear obstacle, so you're running through the woods and you come up over a hill and you see a half mile out is the spear throw. You're jogging to it. Let's say it's raining. Well, that spear's going to be wet. Your hands are going to be wet. Your clothes are going to be wet. There's no dry patch of grass to wipe that on, so your hands are going to be wet. So you have to compensate for that, plus the rain, plus there might be a little bit of wind, because missing this spear throw could be the difference. But in Virginia, it was the difference between, so I finished 4th in Virginia in 2019. And the difference between 4th and like 8th was the guy who missed the spear throw. He missed it. But this past Saturday, I come up to the spear throw, and let's say the guy before me, he throws it. If he makes it, then the spear is still stuck in that target out there. So you have to pull the string to pull it back. And when I pick it up to throw it, I need to grab that string, because what if I'm standing on it?
Yeah.
And I throw it and it hits the ground? I'm 30 burpees. So I walked up to it this past Saturday, and it was a little damp. and guys were standing, and there were no spears because most people were missing the spear throw. And so, when I say gear is everything, by the way, the pictures just came out today. The official pictures either come out Tuesday or Thursday. They came out today. And the shirt that I wore saved me on the spear throw. And here's why. When I got to the spear throw, I was wet, everybody's wet. And on the corner of my shirt, it was dry. And so when I picked the spear up, I wiped the spear off right there, and then I wiped my hand off on that spot, and I grabbed the spear right there.
And it felt good.
It felt great. I knew it was on. And so, I lined it up. You always rock it. And I've got the rest of the string. I'm lining it up, and I threw it. And when it stuck, I went, ah. It felt great, man. It felt great. And then, so on the pictures today, on my shirt, there's that dirt spot right there on that dry spot. And I tell people, gear is everything in a Spartan race.
Yeah.
But yeah, the spear throw, I mean, I've in 11 or 12 races, I think I've missed it. Oh, I missed it twice. And one was in Asheville, North Carolina, when it was wet and everybody was missing that, but it slipped out of my hand. I mean, imagine that. You throw it, and as soon as it leaves your hand, you realize it slipped. And so you've got that penalty session, man.
Are burpees a part of your training regimen, or you don't do them because you don't want to jinx it?
That is a great question. And up until this year, January 1st, never did I do burpees. Never. Because my thought was, I'm never going to do them in a race, so I'm not going to train with them. I hate them. But I realized how good burpees are for your cardio, for just kind of the plyometric type flow to your workout. So I started adding them between weight reps to keep my heart rate way up. So I'll do a flat bench set and then come over and do 8 burpees and then superset another exercise, do crunches, flat bench, back to a set of eight burpees. So I've added them to where if I did miss an obstacle, I feel like I'd be better at them now because I actually do them versus, burpees are a bad word in Spartan language. It's a bad word.
Yeah, if you miss 5 or 6 obstacles,
your whole day's different.
I'm not sure it's a good word anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you jinx yourself by doing the burpees and working out?
No,
not yet.
No, I haven't. I was 20 for 20. 20 for 20.
Kevin, I've been talking a lot. You want to take the next topic?
Yeah. So Lionel and I have got to be around basketball quite a bit in the last couple of years, and this is not a serious question, so I apologize right up front. But I've never seen Lionel wear the same pair of tennis shoes. So I'm serious.
You got a shoe thing?
Yeah. I've gotten better. I've gotten much better about it, though.
Are they always tennis shoes, basketball shoes kind of thing, or is it all kinds of shoes?
It's all kind of, yeah, even dress shoes. I just like
Do you literally not wear them again?
No, I do. I do. I definitely wear them
because
again.
I'm seeing this guy twice a week, sometimes 3 times, and he's never wearing this. And they're always sweet shoes too, because I like shoes too.
I've had shoes, man, where I go back and I'll pull out a pair like, man, I forgot I even had these, and they're dry rotted, which means I haven't had them on in like 2.5 years. It's crazy.
How many pairs of shoes do you have in your house
now? Tennis shoes. I'm going to guess. I've cut it way down, man. I'm probably 30 maybe pair of shoes.
What?
I've cut it way back, yeah. My brother-in-law and a buddy of his came to visit us one time in Cleveland, and I sent them home and they happened to wear the same size with like 10 pair of shoes apiece, just trimming it down, and I've done that a lot lately.
At the height, though, when you had the most shoes, how many pairs did you have?
50 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not. Come on, Kevin was implying 365.
Well, how could I not imply that? Now, are the boys into shoes too? And let's talk about the boys.
Yeah, the boys are. They're into sports, man. I'm incredibly blessed with 3 kids who, they're good guys, and they're advanced in sports, man. But I never. We never talk about like the results, Landon had a huge game. If he has a huge game in baseball or a huge game in basketball, then after the game, my topic with him is about all of the work that led to that. Not, hey, tonight you had 25, but imagine what we could do, man, if we just keep working, So
You're teaching them to grind.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and they've bought it.
What are their names and ages?
So Landon is 9, Leighton is 6, and Logan is 4.
So you like L? You like
They're all LJB.
Okay. All
So
right.
my first son, his name is Landon, and I gave him my middle name, so it's Landon James Bacon. Then we had another boy, named him Leighton, and my mom's first name was Jesse, so named him Leighton Jesse. And then the third, we found out we were pregnant again, and we're at the ultrasound, and I'm talking to my oldest son at the time, Landon, who was 5, and my other son, who was 2 at the time, and I'm talking to them, and we're talking about names, and I'm like, it can't be Lionel, Landon, Leighton, and Steve. like what's he feel like as an adult?
Steve feels like an outcast, right?
And so Landon says, we were actually talking about this about a week ago, and Landon said, Dad, you also said we couldn't name him Dusty Cropper. It's like, you're right, man. It just Lionel, Landon, Leighton, and Dusty Cropper. So it was a given that it had to be an LJB, so we named him Logan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
At least you didn't do the George Foreman thing where he named all of his
Oh,
kids
George. Yeah, no.
That's good stuff.
So how long have you lived in Richmond?
So I came to Richmond in '86 and played ball, but then went to grad school, and then right out of graduate school in '94, I started working for the YMCA.
Okay.
And so I worked 20 years for the Y in 4 different cities. But I came back in 2014. So from 2014 to 2017, I worked in the athletic department at VCU.
And you had reached out to them, or they reached out to you?
It was a combination of both. I was in Chesapeake and was starting to think about doing something different. And part of my role with the Y was fundraising. And I really liked it. And I liked it because it was my way of being a voice for kids like me that I grew up with. I could raise money to support youth programs, whatever that looked like. And so, with the Y, you're raising money, you're building boards, you're running programs, you're balancing budgets, you're doing all that. But with fundraising, you're just sitting down talking to people. And I always describe, people say, well, what do you do? What do you do? I said, well, the fancy name is I'm vice president of philanthropy. But what I really do is I'm a translator. I'm an interpreter. And I explain it by saying that the best interpreters are those who have been submersed in the language. So if you spoke French, I spoke English and French, you spoke German, and I spoke English and German and French, the two of you can't talk unless I stand in the middle and tell you what he's saying and tell you what he's saying.
Right.
So I stand in the middle because I grew up on that side of the kids in the need. But I've been blessed to the point where, now I can function on both sides.
You've been in both worlds, yeah.
I've been both worlds. So I stand in the middle and articulate the needs and get people to join me as a donor.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you enjoy doing it too, which matters.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
The organization I'm with now is different than the organization known as the Y. The Y is an amazing organization, been around for probably coming up on 200 years now, and VHBG, Virginia Home for Boys and Girls, we're in our 175th year this year.
Oh, wow.
But raising money for the Y, I was raising money to help a single mom put 3 kids in programs, 2 in swim lessons, 1 in basketball, and then the family to get a membership. Whereas now I'm raising money to provide a home for 3 kids who've been abused sexually, socially, mentally, neglected, all of the above by mom's boyfriend,
Yeah.
or uncle. And they don't even have a place to live, so I'm providing, so it's easy for me to sit down and talk to people about that. A lot of people say, man, I just can't ask for money. I can't either, but I can ask if I'm asking on behalf of kids like me.
Right.
Gladly.
Yeah.
I can do that.
So are you paid by the Virginia Home for Boys and
Absolutely,
Girls? Okay.
yeah.
So it's a paid job now, but
Yep.
you are absolutely in love with how you make money.
I do.
Yeah.
I am. I love what I do.
That's awesome. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about your wife.
Yep. My wife is she's amazing. Her and I met actually at the Y, but we met at a Y that I didn't work at. I was working out there, and she was working out there, and I used to see her in the mornings, and started talking to her one day, and
There it is.
there
One
it
thing
is.
led to another.
Yeah.
and
You got-
LJB.
You got three LJBs
Right.
later. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 boys.
That's very cool. So the last three we've done, Kevin is co-host. Kevin gets to ask the last question.
Well, my last question was going to be about the shoes. Thanks a lot. But no, I've got tons of questions I can ask Lionel. So
Kevin likes to give 5-parters for his last question.
let's do a little game.
All right.
Jimmy Fallon is out tonight,
All right.
and you are the host.
All right.
You can have a male guest, a female guest, and a music group, and you can set this up however you want.
They can be
I wanna
famous,
get-
not famous, whatever.
Yep, dead or alive. You want to get ratings. You just want to talk to somebody that you idolize or loved or whatever.
Or want to learn from. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a deep question, Kevin.
it's not really that deep, I don't think.
Lionel's given some real thought to it.
But Lionel,
Well,
is a
I'm
deep
only
thinker.
trying to figure out who the female guest and the music guest are. The guy, I've got that. That's gonna get ratings. That everybody in the world's gonna tune into that one. Let me see the girl, the lady.
And while Lionel's thinking, I'll add that my good friend Rob Dole is here tonight taking notes. He loves the podcast, and he's thinking about writing a little book about the guests that have come on the podcast. He's been writing feverishly the entire time. I love it.
Okay, I'll start with the female. I'd probably have Serena Williams on. The first person that came to mind was Kamala Harris. But nowadays, this world has fallen apart with some of the ridiculous loyalty to political parties over people.
It's entirely divisive.
It's worse. The loyalty to blue or red is worse than Crips and Bloods.
Yeah.
Great way to look
Right and wrong goes out the window when politics comes in. So I would love to, whether she was a Democrat or Republican, I think it'd be cool to have the first, or to have a vice president, black female vice president on. So anyway, I think that would be great, or my own minority vice president. The music group, that's a tough one because musically I travel in a lot of different lanes. And so I'd probably pick a group that the majority of people could identify with, and I'm at a loss of who. I'd probably have Bob Marley and the Wailers, just for everybody.
That'd be awesome.
But the guy that I would have, that I think would have amazing ratings, and you said dead or alive, I think people would tune in to see a guy who's 52 years old and who's never seen a picture of his dad sit down and actually talk with his dad.
Oh, man.
And just to see what he looks like. And, I've heard things about my dad from my mom, and I've recently realized that I didn't ask my mom enough questions about my dad before he passed, because my dad is not the dad of the first 10 kids my mom had. My dad is my sister and my dad.
Right.
So one of my older sisters and one of my older brothers have told me they said, your dad, we never saw him in tennis shoes. My older sister said, I never heard him speak. He was always dressed to a T, smoked cigars. So those are kind of some of the, and he was a good man. My mom always told me how much of a good man my dad was. But the irony is, not the irony, but all of the stories that I heard about my dad were from family members, and they were just little bits and pieces. But 3 years ago, my niece ran into a guy. She was doing some volunteer work, and a guy's looking at her and he goes, "Who's your mom?" And she said, "Well, my mom is Heidi Bacon." He goes, "Who's her mom?" And she goes, "Her mom was Jesse Bacon." "Well, who's her dad?" And she said, "Well, my grandfather was Sam Vines." And he said, "Your grandfather was Sam Vines? Like Sam Vines from the East End?" And she was like, "Yeah." And so she said, "You knew him?" And he said, "Yeah, I knew Sam well." So my niece went home and told my sister that. And my sister told me that. And I went to Louisville. I wanted to talk to a guy who, could tell me something about my dad. I knew he was murdered, and I knew some of the details, but it was so long ago, and it was kind of stories from my mom. But so long story short, we go to this guy's office, and my sister and I sit down, and he's just looking at me, and he said, "So you're Sam Vine's son?" I said, "I am." And he's an older black guy. I said, "I am." And he's just kind of looking at me like, And I said, "My sister and my niece told me you knew my dad?" And he said, "Yeah." And he just paused. He didn't say anything. And so I kind of felt like he was choosing his words carefully, and how much do I tell this guy about his dad?
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, listen, let me tell you who I am." And I said, that might help. I said, "I'm Lionel Bacon. I'm 50 years old. I have 3 sons. I've never seen a picture of my dad. I don't know much about Sam Vines. I only know about what my mom told me, but I grew up in Beecher Terrace, went to Ballard, played basketball, went to VCU, earned a scholarship there, graduated in 4 years, got my master's degree. I'm now I went through all that." And he looked at me and he said, "Sam will be proud of you."
Oh, man.
And that, that was powerful for me because, it was cool to hear. It was almost like my dad saying he was proud of me. Yeah. So, but then he went on to tell me, he said, he told me some things that he said, your dad was a good guy. And he said, your dad was getting money from black guys and white guys. He said, and he was the only guy in the city that the white guys dealt with. And I said, what do you know about his murder? And he said, well, he said your dad was murdered when the state sent me on my vacation. Oh. And he said, but your dad was a good guy. And he said, and he told me the names. He said, I always heard that they were involved in that and they did that. And one of them's deceased and the other, but anyway, but he just had good things to say about my dad, and they kind of fell in line. I think there were some things that he didn't tell me that I'm old enough to figure out. But my dad was a good guy, and that, I just have to tell my kids that,
Yeah. It's a powerful visit to Louisville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right about people wanting to watch him coming through those curtains.
Yeah.
You get to see him.
Yeah, I'd love to. I show my sons pictures of my mom, because they know that their mom has a dad and mom. They have grandparents on their mom's side, but they don't have a grandfather or grandmother on their dad's side. So, I can show them pictures of my mom, and I'm always telling them about her, and, they all know her nickname and all, they know a lot about their family because they're growing up away from them. Like my oldest son can name all my siblings, and he's 9. He knows all the ones he met. But I just don't have anything to. And the gentleman that told me about my dad, I said, listen, if you could find a picture, it would be amazing. And my dad had another son who was murdered, and I remember when he was murdered, and I have a picture of him, and he looks like me. And my mom always told me I look like my dad. So I just kind of have to piece it together, but I've always heard just how good of a man he was,
Yeah. That's a good place to end it, I think. Lionel. Thank you very much for joining us. Incredible story. You got an awesome story, man. I'm glad you could tell it with us here tonight, and I'm glad Kevin was here, and Kevin connected us. Can't wait for us to put it out there for folks to check out.
I appreciate the time, man. Appreciate the opportunity to come and just share.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.